Welcome everyone to Unsheathed Sword Reviews. I'm Vic.
I'm John.
And I'm Scott.
And thank you for joining us on our inaugural episode of Unsheathed Sword Podcast. So yeah, guys, thank you for joining us. It's going to be the first episode of our podcast. For the returning viewers of the channel, you probably recognize myself and Mr. John. New face to some of you might be William Scott Hill sitting right next to me.
AKA Battle Santa.
AKA Battle Santa. He has been affectionately named by some of you in the comment section. I just want to say, Mr. Scott, how the hell are you? Welcome to the show finally.
Hey, thanks for inviting me over. It's been a lot of fun so far. I can't wait for more fun. This is great. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So real quick, regardless of what platform you're finding us on, I just want to let you all know this episode will be available on the YouTubes, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, really wherever you find podcasts that are near and dear to your heart.
Carrier pigeon.
Wherever. Yeah. Dude, that's commitment. Like if you watch us that way, that is commitment. But if you're listening to us on an audio platform, if you want to see our beautiful, handsome faces,
video on carrier pigeon, but
you can check out the YouTube and watch us on camera.
They make thumbsticks for a reason, Scott.
So,
the technology I don't understand.
So Scott has actually been a lifelong friend of ours. He's been friends with us as long as John and I have been friends, and he's been a part of this channel from the beginning. Again, you've probably seen him in cutting footage, and he's finally now able to do some on-camera stuff. So Scott, how are you? You have anything to say to the people? You have anything to say to the first-time listeners of the podcast?
Well, I'm just excited to finally be unsheathed on the Unsheathed Sword review. Yes, we have been friends for a very, very long time. It's good to be here talking about sword stuff. I'm excited. Let's get into it.
Awesome.
Let's make it happen.
And John, what topic are we going to be talking about today?
Today, we are going to talk about swords in movies, television, and other pop culture. So that's kind of the topic today. And, you know, all of us are fans of swords and all of us are fans of pop culture. And where those two things meet and make beautiful babies, that's what we're going to talk about today.
Nice. Yeah.
Making babies.
I definitely think if you're a sword enthusiast, for the majority of us, it probably started out by watching really cool movies and TV and
cartoons and stuff like that.
Yeah, whatever
Absolutely.
It was. So yeah, definitely excited. So this is maybe like an easy first topic, so to speak. But hey, you know what? Whatever. We're going to see where this goes. So we don't have like a top 5 or top 10. I just wrote down a bunch of different ones. I think we all did something a little different. And we're just going to go around and start talking about, you know, stuff that inspired us. Scott, would you like to go first?
Well, sure. Thanks for asking, Vic. I will go first. Now, for me, a sword is a piece of metal built by a man or group of people. And so it's in itself is not super interesting other than the tool of anarchy and war, which some of us like, yes. And so for me, the characters around the sword make it a little more interesting. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was the characters in these TV shows and movies that are super interesting. So for me, the first one, is that where we're going right now?
Yeah.
All right. Is the sword wielded by the bride in Kill Bill.
Nice.
Now, this sword was forged by the masterful hands of Hattori Hanzo, a man who swore a blood oath never to make another sword. But when he heard, the bride convinced him when she said that she was going to use this blade to kill Bill, a former student of his, after he attacked her at her wedding and tried to kill her and her unborn child, okay, and then shot her in the head. That's what convinced him to make this sword. And when he made it, he said it was his greatest creation. And she used this sword. I don't think she ever killed Bill with this sword.
Yeah. He walked away and died, right?
Yeah. I think she killed a bunch of other people. Never got Bill killed with this sword. So for me, that was my first sword on my list of movies, TV, and/or popular media.
Nice. Nicely done, sir.
Thanks.
Also, again, for those of you who long-term followers of the channel that have never got to experience the magic that is Scott Hale, he just makes stories come alive, doesn't he? I missed you so much.
Another thing to point out about Scott that we didn't mention in the beginning is that all of the artwork that you see on our channel, including our podcast background, our business cards, our everything that we have.
The scutum painted that's usually in the background.
The scutum that's behind Victor now. Yeah, all that stuff is Scott's artwork. He is immensely talented, and we are very pleased to have him in that capacity.
Well, thanks, John.
Hey, man, seriously. And my tattoos, actually. I should point that out. I mean, while we're giving kudos.
Nice. Should I go, do I want to do just like a reverse clockwise or whatever?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right.
So that would be me then, right?
Yeah.
Clockwise would be you, anti-clockwise would be me.
Okay. Either way.
circle.
Either way.
Right.
Do it.
I'll go. It's going to be great.
All right.
So because I'm how I
We're
am.
not in a circle. Shut up, Scott. Fuck you.
So because I'm how I am, I'm going to pick 3 swords that all take place in the same or all exist in the same intellectual property. And those are Fidelacius, Amaracius, and Esperacius.
Nice.
And those of you who have read the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher know what I'm talking about. And the story of those 3 swords, first of all, just a little background on the universe of the Dresden Files. Belief gives things power in that universe. So, for example, the Shroud of Turin, some of you may have heard that. In that series of books, there is a fake Shroud of Turin that's in the cathedral in Turin, and everyone believes it's real. So just because people believe it's real, it actually has metaphysical power. And the real Shroud of Turin is like infinitely more powerful, but that, of course, is in Hades' vault in the underworld, because of course it is. So anyway, these 3 swords are relics of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And now, a thing to point out, I'm not Christian. I am kind of an atheist. But the way Butcher handles this subject is so well done that at one point he got a letter from like a Wiccan and a Christian in the same week, both saying how well he handled their religions. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
In any case, so the point of these swords is that each one of them has a nail from the crucifixion embedded in the base of the blade or the crossguard. And what that does is it gives, all sorts of magical powers to these swords that basically enable the carriers, when they're on the right side of an issue, to be almost invincible. They're able to basically get all of the breaks, get all of the good luck things, have like a heads up display of where enemies are coming from, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really neat concept. And a lot like Scott, I think that swords do their, like most plot devices and most things in stories do their best work when they sort of represent a point the story is trying to make, or character development, or something like that. And I think that all 3 of those swords at various times do an excellent job of that. They're not just neat, like shiny things in the plot. They actually illustrate like what's going on and sort of help spell out the characters and talk about the characters. So it's really, really interesting. It's a good thing.
Nice. I'm really happy you went Dresden Files. So, like, I was solely keeping it to movies and TV. If I had thought to do other media, Amaracius would have totally been on mine. So
well, if I had only been given better instructions by the guy who told us what we were going to do last night, I would have also known that we were supposed to do that.
You were given perfect instructions. John went rogue.
I did go rogue.
As he's one.
And I'm glad, because he's the one who introduced us both, right, to Dresden Files.
Yes.
Yep. Yes. And we all like it.
Yeah.
a lot.
We like it a lot. John loves it.
Love it. It's true. Yeah.
Which is true.
He's an expert on the subject matter.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible.
I almost can't talk Dresden Files with him because I was like, I think this about this book. And he's like, well, that's because
I don't know that much about anything. I'll tell you the truth.
All right. So I'm gonna go with a more recent series. So I kind of went on my list. The way I approached it was like swords that inspired me. So like a lot of it's gonna be older stuff from like my childhood and growing up and whatnot. And later in future episodes, when we start having guests on, one of the questions we're gonna ask them is like, why swords? Like, what is it about swords that gets you, that hooks you, that makes you feel something? And so for me, a big part of that is the concept of like the hero sword. You know what I mean? There's the hero, he's going on this journey, and he gets the sword, and it's the thing that helps him fight, the forces of darkness, whatever it is. There's something about that, something about pulling Excalibur out of a rock. You know what I mean? Like, that concept to me is really cool. So I'm going to go with a newer version of that, where when Homeboy got the hero sword, you're just like, it's going to happen. And this sword belongs to a man by the name of Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
So I'm going to go
with
it. Uhtred of Bebenba. I'm going to go. So first of all, this is from The Last Kingdom on Netflix. It is a series and a movie. They've wrapped up the series after that. If you haven't watched it, check it out. It's really, really good. If you're a fan of Vikings, you'll like this. You can go back and forth or which one you think's better. I personally think The Last Kingdom was just more engaging for me. Like, I liked it a lot more.
So what you're saying is that they're a fan of real Vikings and the movie Vikings, right? Like
if you're a fan of the series Vikings,
any Vikings,
the fan of the series Vikings, you'll probably not real. If you know a real Viking, like set up a video call.
How about historical Vikings? Since he was actually
he was a real human person. Yes. His sword, however, is pretty ahistoric for something that would have existed in the time period. However, I will say, still looks awesome, and I could separate my disbelief. Like, I could watch a show like Last Kingdom or like Vikings and not need everything to be historically accurate. It's just theater set in the backdrop of this world, and I'm here for that. Uhtred's sword in the show looks awesome. Big, wide blade, deep fuller, like two-handed grip, and the pommel is something that's sentimental from his childhood. And once he gets that sword, how many people he wrecks with it, how he changes the landscape of what's happening in the show with it. Like, there's even the scene, spoilers, when, you know, he becomes a slave and then comes back and then gets the sword back is when he finds himself again. And I love that concept so much. And Uhtred, son of Uhtred, that sword is pretty freaking awesome.
I love it when he contracts the sword in the show and he says to the guy, make it your best or she'll make herself your last.
Yes.
Or something like that. Or I'll make her your last or something like that.
And then when he goes to buys it, he's just like, oh, yeah, so how much do we say? He's like, 10. He's like, oh, no, he's like, oh, yeah, so here's 12. He's like, we said 10. He's like, yeah, but it's worth 12. Yeah, totally that's pretty awesome. So yeah, that was my first pick.
Nice. All right, my second pick is the sword from the character Blade. Now,
I forgot about that one. Damn, that would have been on my list.
When your name is Blade, you know you're all about the sword business, okay? And so Blade is a character. His mother was attacked by a vampire while she was pregnant, which forced her into premature labor. He was born as a vampire-human hybrid, okay? His sword, and then he becomes a vampire hunter. He hates vampires. He has all the powers of vampires and none of the weaknesses, except for, I think that he has a
except for like all of their weaknesses.
He has a thirst of human blood. He has, he has to take care of that too. But anyways, his sword is made from titanium. And I believe, I snorted, did you hear that? I believe that there is a trigger in the hilt where if like the wrong person gets it and doesn't pull the trigger or something like that, it will explode in their hand, blow their hand off. Blade is a cool character. He's a cool character in both comic books and movies. Okay. And those were some real fun movies to watch. And see, like I said, the sword itself is just a tool, like John said, for the character. The character is Blade, and that's who I'm talking about.
I like how they used the sword in that too. What was the main bad guy's name in that movie?
Deacon Frost.
Deacon Frost, yes. That's right. So the first guy that picks up Blade's sword is just kind of like a henchman, a high-level henchman.
I got his pig sticker.
Exactly. And then the thing goes off, and it just turns his hand into paste, which is awesome. I love that. It's like that sound, and his hand is just gone. But then when Deacon Frost picks it up, because he's done his research, he knows how it works. So that's an amazing plot device. I think it's like the Worf effect almost.
Yeah.
I really like how they did that with that. I thought that was super cool.
And I think that blade was passed down from vampire hunter to vampire hunter to vampire hunter.
Oh, I thought what's his name made it.
I thought
his mentor,
Whistler or whatever.
Whistler, yeah, that's his name. Whistler, yeah.
You might be right about that, but then it was passed down to him.
Fair.
Okay. Yeah,
fair.
I'll buy that.
I legitimately cannot believe that I forgot about that. So that would easily have made my list. But hey, you know what? Now we're not going to be redundant. Also, as soon as you said that, did anybody else hear techno music start playing in their head? Because I did. Also, Blade has probably one of my
vampire blood party right there, bro.
Right, exactly.
Has one of my favorite lines in anything ever. John?
Some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill.
I knew he would know it. Oh, it's so ridiculous, and I love it. I'm here for it. Okay.
Also, I mean, we can make the argument that there would be no MCU if not for Blade.
1,000%.
Which is worth saying and worth thanking Wesley Snipes and the Blade team for, because damn.
That is a whole conversation worth getting into for any of you young fellas that don't know. Like, Marvel was on the brink of bankruptcy at that point.
Well, it was the first successful movie. However, Marvel only made $25,000 from that movie.
I mean,
one
fair.
lump sum.
But that
So
made
they
that
didn't make
made
a bunch of money, but it showed that a comic book money can be successful
Right.
and well received by the public.
and it also it
the
did
viewing
make,
audience.
but it did make like 130 million, and so
Yes.
that made other studios start buying licensing rights. So that
Yes,
did, yeah.
they started buying their characters that they couldn't use later on because they were licensed to other studios.
It's a whole
Right.
conversation. All right, back to me. I'm gonna circle.
Actually, no, it's not back here.
Oh, that's right. We're going the other way. My bad. Sorry.
Oh,
I got so
the
eager.
other
I got
way,
so
the
eager.
Circle,
Yeah.
non-existent circle on the
Right,
clock.
right.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Go for it,
I'm a
John.
therapist, dude. We always think in circles. We can't help it.
So instead of going this way, we went this way.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Got it. Yep, you understand. Good. Glad you kept up. So, all right. So the next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about, some of you may have seen it on Netflix, The Old Guard,
Nice.
which is a very, very good movie or show. A movie.
That's
Yeah.
a movie. It's a movie.
Yeah, and they
Based
are,
off a comic.
Yep, based on a comic, exactly. I think a Vertigo comic, was it?
I don't know. Scott, do you know?
Either that or Dark Horse.
If
Yeah,
you know, let us
has
know
to
in the
be one of
comments. Let us know in the comments if you know.
Yeah, it's one of the two. I think it actually might be Dark Horse. But in any case, the premise is, if you haven't seen it, there are, for some reason, we don't really know why, there are immortals, think Highlander kind of, and so they are unkillable. You can do horrible, grievous bodily injury to them, and they come back to life and continue to fight relatively quickly, like within 10 minutes or less than that. So, and also they don't age over time. So yeah, think like Highlander is a very good thing to think about if you've seen those movies or the show. So in any case, there are several of them, and the premise of the show is that we get a new one introduced. But 3 of the folks that are in the show have been around since the Crusades or longer ago. And so it's a really, really neat idea. And so the 4 characters I mostly want to talk about are Andy, and I can't think of how to pronounce her full name, Andalucia or Andis, something like that. Probably cut that out.
I think you did perfect.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it. What are you talking about?
First try.
But so she's been around since prehistory. She's been around since forever. And then 2 of the other people are Joe and Nikki, and they are both people that became immortals during the Crusades and were actually on opposite sides during the Crusades. One was on the side of Saladin, the other's on the side of the European Crusaders. And so they killed each other like 5 or 6 times when they first met, and then they fell in love, and they've been in love as a couple since then. And so Joe carries what is essentially a falchion, but like kind of like a fantasy falchion. And I think the reason they picked that sword is because, like most people, they pick, Christian knights have cruciform swords, and the bad guys, quote unquote, have curved swords with a single edge. So it's probably not terribly accurate that he would be having a falchion back then, but that's what it's represented as. And then Nikki has a longsword, looks like maybe a Type 18 longsword. It's definitely got a 2-handed grip, got a scent stopper pommel, pretty elaborate guard, but really, really pretty and very utilitarian. It looks like it would work. It looks like a nice sword, but a sword that would work. And then again, Andy's got her axe. And so it makes sense in the context of the thing. And so they're all employed as like these horribly, horribly badass mercenaries that like find causes that they support and then go in and like murder all the bad guys. And like, it doesn't make much sense. And in the beginning of the show, you have no idea what's going on because you got these 4 obvious badasses walking in to kill a bunch of terrorists. We've all seen that before in a bunch of movies. But they've all got weapons on that are like melee weapons. They've all got like a sword or an axe. And you're like, what is going on here?
On top of other tactical stuff, and that's what was cool. They still had rifles, they still had vests and all that, but then like homeboy had a sword on his hip. Like that was really cool.
And you're like, what? You're like, what's going on here? That doesn't make any sense. But and the reason it makes sense is because these folks are bullet sponges. You can shoot them as many times as you want, but they're going to close with you and cut you into little pieces.
And Kevlar ain't stopping a sword.
Exactly, and Kevlar's not stopping a sword. So it's a really, really neat concept, and it's really well developed. And they also have another gentleman that joined them later on whose name is Book, but because he came from the 18th century when swords weren't as huge of a deal, he doesn't carry a sword because he like the other 2 obviously were trained since they were 5 years old to have a sword, and now they've been training for 1,000 years, and they're doing pretty well. So they carry it with them into it's just fantastic. And another thing I think they do really well with it is with Andy's axe. It's this really crazy, like modern looking axe with like almost like a tennis racket grip on it. And it's got these really cool curved blades on it. It's fantastic. And I think that they use that in the movie as like a metaphor for her power in a lot of ways. Because at one point when spoiler alert, she loses her ability to heal, she also loses her axe. And the main antagonist gets a hold of it. And then it sort of shows that even though he has that, he's inept with it. So it kind of speaks to her power as a character, I think. I think it's really well done. So yeah, and plus it's just a great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. And they're coming out with a new one, I think, next year. Or this year.
I actually recently rewatched that. Really good. And so if you guys haven't checked it out,
Holds up, right?
it does hold up. Check it out, definitely. And real quick, like about the plot of the movie, after a certain amount of time, they lose their immortality, and they don't know why. It's random, happens out of nowhere. It's just one time they'll die, and then they won't come back. So every time any of them does die, there's always this sense of, oh shit, are they going to come back or not? And that adds a sense of like drama and consequence where like if they were just straight up immortals, wouldn't have been there. And Agreed. I loved that so much.
Agreed. And I have a theory about why they lose their immortality too, but that's a different podcast.
Nice. Nice pick, sir. Well played. Okay, I'm going to pick one that neither of you two are going to give any kind of a shit about, but I don't care. This is my list. I'm going to go all the way back. Way, way back.
Mighty Morphin Power.
And the before, oh, he knows me so well. Red Ranger Power Sword. Yes. Shut up. Red Ranger Power Sword. Red Ranger, the OG Jason, has the long sword, which is ridiculously impractical. Actually, the blade looks like something that could have been on a long sword, but the whole hilt of it is ridiculous and over the top and you know, anime-ish inspired like the whole series was back in the day. But that was like 6-year-old Vic watching that show. Yes, got sucked into that mindfuck of a show. Hey, there's not a White Ranger helmet in my living room. You don't know me. There is, and I've worn it. But so
it's right next to your wrestling belt.
Hey.
Good for you, kid. That's right. Nice job.
I like it. I'm a glowing example of what happens when a kid grows up and starts making adult money.
And has no kids.
That's the real part of it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because kids aren't expensive.
But that was one of the first times where like I saw a weapon, I saw a sword, and I was just like taken back by it. That I was literally just like engrossed by it. And then honorable mentions to the Green Rangers, Power Flutes, and Saba from the White Ranger. All of these weapons, like everything that happened in Power Rangers, was like the first step. I'm gonna play the sound effect when is the first step. He has no idea. I love that so much. I nerd out for Power Rangers. You can't go back and watch it now. It's really, really bad. But you know what? It's fine. Nostalgia's a motherfucker, isn't it? Love that sword so much, and that's on my list. Scott, what you got?
Well, John.
My name's Vic, but cool.
Well, I was talking to John.
Okay. You looked at me.
I know. Because I was talking to John. I was going to be talking about you.
Right, okay.
I only wish that Vic would have given us enough time to revisit some of these properties before we did this today when he gave us this information last night.
What?
Now, Piggy...
I did not give him the information last night. That was a text message. I will go look at the
text. It was last night, bro.
That's not last night, bro.
Yes, it was.
Maybe John and I were talking about it.
So the two of you were talking about this way before you gave me the information last night. So I only wish I had time to revisit some of these properties.
Yeah.
However, though...
Positive effect.
John, piggybacking on your theme of Immortals.
Okay.
We're going back to the one and only Connor McLeod from the Clan McLeod.
Hell yeah.
The Highlander. Okay. Who suddenly finds out when he gets impaled that he's an immortal and can't die. He wields now. For the first swords I believe that I talked about were katanas. Am I right in both of those properties?
Kill Bill.
So this is going to be a Scottish longsword. Okay, and it's from his family. It's his family sword that was passed down from generation to generation. It's etched with the name McLeod. Okay, he uses this with his first fight with Kurgan. Okay, and he wields this sword up until he's immortal, lives forever. So his wife dies. Well, his wife Heather, and
spoilers.
Okay, sorry. Yes, should I have done spoiler alert before
for a movie that came out in 1983 or some shit?
Anyway,
you never know.
If you're not caught up yet,
he uses that sword as her headstone, leaves it at her gravesite when he moves on with the rest of his long immortal life. So that sword, his Scottish longsword, as Connor McLeod from the Clan McLeod, as a Highlander, that is my third sword on my list. It's a fun property, the Highlander property, and it's a good watch. It's fun. Immortals. There can only be one.
Nice.
Yep. And also, I particularly like the Highlander show. And again, that's very much like a Power Rangers kind of thing. Like if you go back and watch it now, it's kind of fun, but it doesn't really hold
Which
up.
McLeod is that?
That's Duncan McLeod.
Duncan McLeod. Yes, Duncan, a good Scottish name.
He's several generations younger than is Connor. But yeah, yep. Well, Duncan is a good Scottish name, man. There's a character in Macbeth named Duncan.
Oh, didn't know that. Okay.
But spoiler alert, we're not going to tell you what happens when there is only one again. You're going to have to watch what, Trifecta?
Yep.
To find that out.
I retract my laugh in my bed. All right.
Yeah.
So, the next sword I'm going to talk about is one that is near and dear to my heart, perhaps more than any of the others that I've listed. So, this sword was forged during the first age of Middle Earth by Telcor, the dwarf.
That's a long time ago.
Who also, if you are fans of this particular intellectual property, you know that he also forged the dragon mask and also the knife that pried the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Okay, so this guy makes some pretty good equipment. And so he forged this sword, and it was called Narsil. And through ways we don't really know how, it became one of the what's the word I'm looking for here? Like the hallmarks, the hand-me-downs, the heirlooms, that's the word, of the royal line of Arnor, Gondor, and was passed on that way. And some of you may know, it was broken when it cut the ring, or just slightly before it cut the ring from Sauron's finger during the Battle of the Last Alliance in Elves and Men. That's right. I am talking about Narsil, also later turned into Andúril, which is the Flame of the West. But yeah, Andúril, the Flame of the West, wielded by Aragorn, son of Arathorn, in his claim to reclaim the throne of Gondor. And so people kind of sleep on this one. And I think a lot of the reason people sleep on this sword is because of the movies. Now, the movies are good. They're a good adaptation of the books. I have a lot of complaints about the way they were adapted, but I think they're pretty good in general. But people sleep on this sword. This is a magical sword, people. This is not just a regular, really well-made, really sharp sword.
Work with me, people.
Yeah, really. Work with me. So I'm serious. First of all, it shines either in the light of the moon or the sun. It shines red or blue, depending which one of those two things it's in.
That's freaking cool.
Yeah, super, super cool. Okay. Number one. Number two, it can cut through armor and helmets. And like, that's not a thing. Tolkien doesn't talk about a lot of practical magic when he writes his books. But for instance, they're in Moria, and there is a goblin chieftain who basically stabs Frodo with a sword. Fortunately, Frodo's got his mithril coat on, and it doesn't hurt him. But Aragorn, belatedly thinking Frodo's already dead, brings his sword down on this goblin's steel helmet. And there is a flash of light, and suddenly the helmet and the goblin's head are both cut completely in half down to his neck.
Damn.
So as many of you know that are fans of medieval swords don't do that. Yep. Like, now that goblin would have been knocked out, probably had traumatic brain damage, but it's not going to cut through his helmet and into his head. That's what this sword is, man. This is a magical sword. And it represents the royalty of Arnor, Gondor, and all that sort of stuff. I think it's a really good job, and it brings the sort of old Middle-earth into the new Middle-earth as Aragorn ruling in the Fourth Age. So yeah, I think it's a really excellent sword and very cool.
Nice. I love it. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. My next sword. I'm going to do a singing intro. Ready?
Oh, I can't wait.
Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe. Apologies to you people.
Yeah.
Highlander. Yeah, buddy. So, all right, I'm actually really happy that Mr. Scott didn't straight go to the katanas, because here's the deal. Duncan MacLeod's my guy. The Highlander series was my jam. I like the movies too. I watched those after the fact. But I'm going to go with Duncan MacLeod's katana. Nice. Now, I will say that Connor MacLeod's katana, I like the look.
What's that called? Something tooth? What is it?
Something tooth. I should have researched. You would think.
Here. While you're talking about
there
it,
you go.
Look it up for
there
you,
you go. You would think I would have done some research, but hey, 2-bit operation. What can you do? All right, so here's the deal.
Is Duncan MacLeod we're talking about?
Yeah. I actually like the look of Duncan's sword more, but actually the first sword, wall hanger, SLO, whatever you want to call it, the first any kind of sword that I ever owned was Connor MacLeod's katana, a replica, not functional, given to me by my cousin Joey. If you happen to be watching this, shout out. Thank you, sir. This is all your fault. But that was the first sword that I ever got, and I loved it so much. And John, I hope when I throw it to him here, will tell a little anecdote about how much of a bad friend he is. Way back in the day when he would mock me for it.
So Victor and I, we mentioned at the beginning, we've been friends for a long time. And we met in a training program at a job that we both used to work at. And we, sort of connected and started talking about things. And we talked about how we're both nerds. We have a lot of similar overlap in things we like. And so he just started to tell me about his sword that he had. And I was like, but wait a minute, what's the blade made out of? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, well, can you show it to me? Can you look it up? And so we looked it up. He showed it to me. I was like, oh, yeah, that's not really a sword.
Yeah, and at the time, you had the Hanwei Banshee.
Yeah, that was my one
and only sword that you owned. Yeah, and so anytime at work where I would jokingly be like, I can't wait for someone to break in. I'm going to get them with my sword. And you'd be like, yeah, but you don't have a real sword. Like, I have a real sword.
I did do that. It's
and
true.
So, as you've, some of you might have known from previous videos, I talk about how he shamed me into collecting real swords. Scott, you got an answer?
I don't think it wasn't named. It was just a dragon head katana.
Yeah, it's a dragon head katana. It's an ivory with a dragon sculpted into it and all that. So here's the thing. So like most people when they first start collecting, not most, I should say, some of you when you first start collecting, like you start with katanas because that's what's featured heavily in pop culture and whatnot, right?
Well, so cut through car doors.
Well, I mean,
cut other swords in half, right?
Don't do that. Yeah, so that was the first like non-functional sword that I got, and then the first functional sword I ever got was a katana. Also thanks to John, he purchased that for me as a gift.
I felt like since I was a jerk to him for so long about not having a real sword, the least I could do was actually get him a real sword. So
you also bought Scott an axe. What were you making up for there?
Well, I just didn't want him to feel left out.
There we go.
I think maybe he beat me at some chess a few times and he felt bad about it. So I think that was what it was.
I don't feel bad about beating your chest at all.
Yeah, I think he did it just because he's a nice guy and we're best friends. So
that's probably what it is. Yeah,
nice.
Probably that.
But so I love Highlander. I love the Highlander series. I love the Highlander movies. They're cheesy AF, but if you can get past the 90s and 80s cheese, they're actually like a really, really good story in there. And those swords are really iconic and like parts of my childhood. And so like I'm happy that I have even if it's a wall hanger, I'm happy that I have one. And yeah, I would love to find a functional version of that. I would be all about that.
That would, you know what? That would be really, really cool to have a fully functional. Not even
they make them.
Do they really?
Yeah,
no. They make replicas of all these swords.
But they're not real though. Yeah, they're not functional.
They're stainless steel blades.
They're not.
You cannot get a high carbon steel version of Sting.
But
dude,
I think there's a market for these.
I know, but the problem is it's the licensing. I think
licensing one.
It has to be the licensing.
Licensing one. Go ahead. Sorry.
To make a good high end sword, right? Like it's expensive already, and then if you also have to pay licensing, like that sword is going to be ridiculously expensive.
Well, so you can make a wall hanger, a non-functional sword, sell it for $200, and a lot of people are going to buy it. To make a mid-range functional sword, at the minimum is going to cost $600-$700. Plus the licensing,
probably $1,000.
So you got people like me that would buy it, but then, and even still, there's some like Game of Thrones swords. They're listed as carbon steel, but a non-functional sword can still be carbon steel, especially if it doesn't state what it is, especially if it's not stated that it's heat treated.
The handle construction.
There's a lot of things that go into making a functional versus non-functional sword, as a lot of you probably know. But Matthew Jensen, when we did the live stream with him, he mentioned that there is a company that makes them. And like I still need to look into it because like I don't want to look because I know I'm gonna buy it, and I gotta wait until like I'm ready to buy it because I would drop $1,000 on a functional version of a Highlander katana immediately. So I'm trying to be disciplined with that, but that is
especially
on my
those
list.
Dunkins.
If it's bro, like dude,
yeah, definitely.
All right, Scott, what you got?
All right, what we're talking about next is Inigo Montoya's rapier.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Okay. This was a sword that was originally forged by Inigo's father for the wretched Count Rugen. He's a nobleman with 6 fingers on his right hand. When he returned to receive the sword, after Inigo's father had forged this thing and worked on it for an entire year, he refused to pay him for the sword. Inigo's father refused in turn to sell him the sword because he's not paying for it. You can't sell somebody something that they're not paying for, right? Isn't that how it works?
1/10 its promise price is what he offered to pay for.
Yes, you're right.
Yep.
And so he killed Inigo's father. An 11-year-old Inigo challenged him to a fight. He was beaten within a minute, and the Count scarred Inigo on each cheek as a result and left him with the sword that he had just killed his father for. Not cool at all. And so he spent the rest of the movie searching for the man with 6 fingers on his right hand. And I believe he said, when I meet this man, he did, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Is that the quote?
That's the quote.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya.
There you go.
You
First
killed my father.
introductions,
Prepare to die.
pleasantries. Hello. Okay, yes.
Exactly.
You're right.
Yep.
So for me, that's a fun sword in a fun movie, Princess Bride, for a fun character with a sad history behind it. That's what I got for that.
Yeah, I always liked that. So first of all, I think that's one of the best sword fights in any movie ever.
Yeah.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
It is not at all accurate sword fighting. Like there's nothing accurate about it at all, except for the fact that they are exchanging back and forth the names from actual medieval and or rather Renaissance fencing manuals. Like they're talking about Capistrano and all these sort of things, but none of what they're doing is what they're talking about. It's just they're just using the dialogue. Right. But like fights should tell stories. That fight tells a story better than any other fight, almost I think in any movie I've ever seen. It's amazing.
I just love the bit where it's just like, well, I am not left-handed. It's like, I too am not left-handed. Right? It's so stupid, but it worked so well.
That's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
And even before the fight starts, when Wesley is trying to climb up the rocks and Inigo's already at the top and could easily just cut the rope or throw rocks down on him, he doesn't, and he actually ends up helping him up, letting him rest, take the rocks out of his boots before they fight. So it's such a cool, neat, like character developing thing. That's a great.
Because
That's
you're
a
not going
fun
to take
movie.
advantage of a weakness. You need to fight people at full power.
Exactly.
If you're going to beat them.
Well, especially when being a sword fighter is your thing that you've done for forever. And he even says at one point, he's like, so you've practiced sword fighting for 20 years? He's like, more pursuit than a practice lately. So, yeah. He's kind of into it. Yeah. But no, dude, I love that movie. That's awesome.
Nice.
All right. So I didn't prepare any additional ones, but I've got a pretty good one that I think I can bring up. And that is Luke Skywalker's lightsaber.
Oh my God!
I knew one of you would do it.
We were going lightsabers.
I knew one.
I was thinking about lightsabers.
For those of you who don't know, the man to my left and to my right are the 2 biggest Star Wars fans I've ever met. So yeah, here we go.
Yeah, we almost weren't friends because we had a disagreement over one
There
of the
was
movies.
such a huge disagreement over Rise of Skywalker.
Sad, dark time.
I thought maybe Scott was going to kill me, and I was worried about it.
Yeah.
Completely irrational. It's okay. We all worked it out.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine, isn't it? If I keep smiling, is it fine? Go.
So going back to my last pick for a second, in the movie, they talk about how when Isildur's son picks up his father's sword, right? And that trope, that taking up your father's sword to go out and do good and defeat evil, that's what Star Wars is, man. And like, just because your dad happens to be the evil thing doesn't mean it doesn't hold up. So when Luke Skywalker, he's just a normal country boy, as you all know. He gets the call to adventure when he gets these robot droids. You know, obviously George Lucas was a huge fan of The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So he like basically followed the hero's tale almost exactly. And so, you know, he wanders out into the desert. He meets the wise old man. He gets his father's sword. He's going to go out and bring justice to the galaxy, right? Of course, the first thing he does when he gets the most powerful weapon in the universe is look down the barrel like, oh, yeah, this is good. So anyway, but yeah, I think
Typical farmer.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is a great use of that trope in a non-fantasy, non-sword-like environment, right? Because, I mean, a lightsaber is a sword. That's all it is.
It's a laser sword.
Exactly. A laser sword with no edge. It's all edge. So I always like that idea. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's a great example of using swords for advancing the plot in a movie, particularly when, okay, he gets his father's sword, he does a bunch of stuff, has a bunch of things happen, prematurely goes to confront the big evil and gets that sword taken away, gets like, and you know, obviously swords representation of your power, of your ability to make change in the world, and he basically gets owned and loses that sword. And then has to reinvent himself and reinvent his own sword so that he can continue his quest later on. So I think that's maybe one of the best uses of the sword as a narrative device in anything ever. I think it's really, really well done.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I knew one of you was going to mention a lightsaber. I just wasn't sure which one.
I didn't know if it was within the rules.
There are no rules.
But I'm
what
glad.
rules?
I am glad
We're in my
that John,
dining
I'm
room.
glad John
What
brought it up.
rules?
I'm glad John brought it up. That's all I'm saying.
Your dining room / armory.
Yeah, I don't know if I can call it a dining room anymore.
You don't need a lot of cooked meals in here.
No, I do not. All right. Okay, so for my next sword, I'm going to circle back to the conversation we were having earlier about the hero sword, like the hero getting the sword and that representing their cause and their righteousness and all that. And for me, a big part of that Braveheart's Claymore.
Okay.
Now,
Nice.
I love the movie Braveheart. I'm sure most of you have seen
That
it.
one was originally on my list. But
Nice.
I took it off.
So
Good one.
for the sword enthusiasts among you, I assume most of you watching this podcast
That haven't turned it off yet.
Yeah, you know that the term claymore is a little bit problematic in this context. What a claymore is actually historically referring to would be like a Renaissance era basket-hilted sword, a basket-hilted broadsword, basically.
Like the sword that Conor McGregor used.
Yeah, the Highlander sword.
Yeah.
Sword,
Yep.
exactly. That's
So a
basket
basket-hilted broadsword is basically a claymore.
Yep.
Now, and there's a lot of reasons as to why that term got muddied. Scholargram actually did a really good video explaining why that terminology got kind of messed up. Whatever, this movie calls it a claymore. I'm going to call it a claymore. It is a big-ass sword that he uses in all the battles that he uses when he yells, freedom, has it up in one hand, dude. And again, talk about movies stirring emotions. They're stirring you to get rallied up to the cause. Like, dude, so fantastic movie. Like, if any of you haven't seen it, what the hell? Watch the movie. Great movie. Still holds up despite, a little bit of cheesiness because of its time, and also obviously some, some, what is it called, acronyms or whatever. Anachronisms. There we go. Because they're gonna Hollywood it up a little bit, but that movie's fantastic. Watching him do some work with that sword is fantastic, and that big beast has always stood in my brain. It's part of the reason why I do want a functional claymore, despite the fact that like they're not my favorite.
So you can
sword
start
type.
your own Scottish rebellion against the English. Is that why you want one?
Yes.
Okay.
1000%. And I wouldn't be the only one. But yes,
It
Connor
usually
McLeod.
goes really well.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, so there we go. The Claymore from Highlander is on my list.
Okay, my final sword on my list is, like I said, the characters Ragnar's Sword of Kings.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, swords were implements, were tools, were weapons of the rich. Okay, most of the poor peasants had axes and spears. I mean, that type of steel, that fancy steel, that was the rich people stuff back then. So when you had a sword, it was passed down from generation to generation. And the Sword of Kings, what represented the people who were the authority and the kings of the Danes. Okay, so when Ragnar acquired the King of Swords, he passed it down through, I think Lagertha had it after that, after she killed his second wife, and then it went to Bjorn at the end. And I think that Bjorn maybe at the end held it up when he was attacking, that thing when he was like almost dead, and then he finally, I think he had that.
What was the town called that they were they all?
It was
Kattegat.
Yes.
They were playing hot potato with who was in control of Kattegat. Like that was changing possession all the time, and I assume getting the sword with it. So
yes,
it's a pretty sword.
But then then he wanted to become when you were the king of the Danes, you were like the king of who was the first king when he was there? It was started with an H. Harold, I think Harold maybe was the king.
Yeah,
and then you become the king of all the Danes, not just Kattegat, all of the realms of the Danes. I think that he was considered that at one point. Mm-hmm. But yes, he lived in Kattegat. Everything was Kattegat.
It's very fun to say also.
Yes, it is fun to say.
Especially after having a little bit of mead.
So that's a fun sword with a fun character.
Mm-hmm.
Ragnar. And that's Vikings is a good series.
It's a good. It tapered off a little bit there at the end for me.
Towards the end,
but it was really engaging for most of it.
Agreed.
I mean, spoiler alert: after Ragnar dies,
he dies.
He's the main character. He can't die.
So he died, man. And so then it has sons after that, and there's some slow parts. And so but it's still a good program.
At no point was I'm not gonna watch this anymore. Like it was always engaging enough for me to keep watching. So, But you're right. That is a gorgeous example of a really decked out 9th, 10th century Viking era sword.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
All right. So sorry, John. Here we go. We were messing me up with.
I think we ran out. John and I are about out of swords. So I guess it's just
That's
you
right.
talking about
I got more stuff to talk about now.
I got one left.
I got one left.
Okay. Go for it.
So first of all, I want to say, What was I going to say? I was going to say something important. Oh, I was going to say unpopular opinion. I think that Vikings Valhalla is better than the original Vikings.
What?
Yeah.
So, okay. That's to me not apples to apples because one has 2 seasons, one has like what, 8, 7, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you saying it's better than the first 2 seasons of Vikings?
Yeah, when
I
comparing
would
this to.
disagree.
I'm gonna disagree with that also.
I like it more.
That's fair. I think the first season of Vikings Valhalla is really good. The second season was a bit much for me to get through. I think the first like 4 or 5 seasons of the original Viking show is really good. All right, I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
Gentlemen,
but I appreciate the hot
we're
take.
gonna agree to disagree.
Hot take.
We're gonna agree to disagree.
I love the hot take.
We can agree to disagree, but yeah, I did.
But John, tell us a little more.
Well, I think a lot of it is that once the original Viking show killed Ragnar and switched characters, I sort of stopped caring.
Spoilers.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, you already said it.
No, we already said it.
I know.
Come on now.
It's just fun.
In case you had your ears plugged the first time, we shut up.
Exactly.
Spoilers now.
So yeah, I just kind of couldn't really care about it that much after that, and that's probably a me thing. But I also really like I happen to really like the characters in whatchamacallit in Ragnarok. So I mean, it's just personal taste. But yeah.
I was still down with Bjorn Ironsides. So yeah, I was following along.
Yeah, for me, it was really once like Bjorn died and like spoilers, and once like that stuff started happening, and then
then the one rogue weird son who what was this? Who's the guy who couldn't his legs didn't work?
Ivor the Boneless.
The Boneless, yeah. Ivor the Boneless when he went to the Rus.
Lost me. I was not into that at all.
I didn't like that at first, but then I got into it again.
Fair. I'm gonna disagree because like I was waiting for the show to be over at that point. Like I was just in it, but it was different. I like that they tried something different and they went to a different place, whatever. But yeah, what did you like about it? Why was that still?
Well, for me, it was getting a little stale about the same story right in Katika and all the rest of the places. So I like to see us going to new places with new characters to kind of refresh it a little bit.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I hear you. To me, the thing that made me laugh every time was whoever conquered Kattegat and would lose it immediately to somebody else. It was like, why do you even want it? Because like it's like immediately you're gonna lose that to somebody else. Like it seems like not a really great fortify. Even when Lagatha tried to fortify it, and then she just got swamped like the next time somebody invaded. But oh well.
Side note, though, isn't it amazing how, Ivor the Boneless was a real historical figure, and we don't really know what the Boneless meant altogether, except for the fact, especially in this TV series, when a ruler is built on his power and his ability to dominate and his strength and all this, how this person used his mind and his intellect and his strategy to get to that point is kind of very interesting.
Well, so I love that also because he couldn't use his strength because he couldn't walk. It's almost kind of the same way that Tyrion Lannister, being a dwarf, had to use his intellect because he had nothing else. Yeah.
That was his sword.
And what? Hang on. I smell a segue. That's right. My last 2 picks. So I will go with Longclaw and Ice. I'm gonna throw both of them on there. So Ice, big old badass great sword. The heirloom of House Stark just looks impressive as hell. Again, they do make a replica of this that's non-functional, but I would love a real one. And then I'm gonna go with Longclaw because again, Longhaul to me more so than Ice encompasses like the hero sword.
Yeah.
John gets that and it sends him on a journey. And I love the fact that, like, when he finds out that can kill White Walkers, it's a shame they did nothing with that moving forward. Whatever, I'm not mad, you're mad. But, like, both of them are really, really cool swords. Like, Ice as, like, an early medieval greatsword actually doesn't even look, like, terribly ahistoric. It looks like something that maybe could have existed. Yep. As does Longclaw, despite the fact that the pommel's not facing the right way.
Turned the wrong way.
Yeah, it's definitely turned the wrong way. But whatever. Looks really, really cool. And both the way that they were used and the way that Game of Thrones in general, some of the swords that they talk about, like they do a really good job of giving swords, especially heirloom swords, like a mythos. You know what I mean? Like do a good job of making it mean something when you're holding these swords. And so the whole concept of Valyrian steel is really, really cool. I love all of that. And like I love Game of Thrones. And as long as you stop watching after season 6 or 7, you're probably pretty fine. So yeah. Also, honorable mention, Damon's sword from House of the Dragon. Well, I can't remember the name of it. That sword's freaking awesome.
Something Sister. That Dark
Something
Sister.
Dark Sister? I think that might be it.
I
Yeah.
think it's Dark Sister.
Yeah. That sword's actually really cool. And again, if they want to make these swords for 1% of the market, a functional version, I would buy them. So, yes.
Yeah. I also, just to kind of piggyback off that real quick, the idea of the Sword of the Morning from Game of Thrones too, which is not Valyrian steel, which is a sword that's essentially white and almost glows, and nobody really knows where it came from. It came from a meteorite, but they don't know what kind of metal it is or anything.
Right.
So only carried by the Sword of the Sword of the Morning, and not carried every generation necessarily, because there isn't always a Sword of the Morning. I think that's really an awesome
And that
idea.
was carried by Sir Arthur Dane,
Sir
correct?
Arthur Dane, yep, exactly. And then I think Darkstar has it later, doesn't he? Where he wants to get it later.
It's been so long since I
Yeah,
read
it's been
those.
a while
I
since
can't
read
remember.
those, but I think somebody else gets it later or wants it later.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
that's all I got. You said you had.
Yeah, I have one more, but I also wanted just like the idea of ice always just blew my mind, because Valyrian steel is such a cool concept, right? I mean, it's like it sort of plays off the idea of what used to be like Damascus steel, not pattern welded stuff that we have now, but like this mythical steel that we've lost the ability to make allegedly, which I mean, I don't think there's much to that, but the idea of it is neat. It's like this like mythological, magical metal that they can't even forge anymore, and even just to reforge it takes like there's like 3 smiths in the world that can do it. And so I think about ice, and I'm like, you know what? That's probably a frigging great sword that weighs as much as like a small longsword.
Yeah.
Because it's such good steel, and it's so light. So like the combat advantage that would give you something that big that's that fast.
Right.
Like you'd be terrifying.
Oh yeah. Well, even like Tyrion Lannister, once Tywin gets that and melts it down and makes 2 different swords, he picks up Widow's Wail, I believe, and he's like, even in my clumsy hands, it feels elegant.
Yeah, exactly.
Which so imagine a great sword that should weigh 4 or 5 pounds.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, like at least 5 pounds.
Maybe 6 or 7, depending on how thick it is. Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's moving like a good longsword.
Yeah.
Oh,
you're
cool.
a dangerous person with that. Definitely. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Also, to me, like, it's never directly stated in the books. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my assumption, my headcanon, was always that Valyrian steel was forged using dragon's fire. That was like the magical element was always kind of an Ironford. Was that what your take also?
No, it wasn't. To me, it's like dragons in the world in that world are like connected with magic. So when there's dragons, there's magic. So like when there's dragons, they're able to make the alchemist's fire. When there's dragons, they're able to make Valyrian steel.
More things are possible.
More things are possible because they sort of channel. I think they sort of channel magic into the world. That's how I think about it. So I don't know that they actually use dragon fire for it, but I think that the presence of the dragons made it possible to forge
that makes sense too.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Nice.
So,
well, since we're throwing stuff out that weren't on our list, I want to throw out 2 honorable mentions.
All right.
One is the Sword of Odin, which is awesome. It's more powerful, debatably, than Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor. Okay, it's a sword of the gods, so that's cool.
That's very cool.
Doesn't Odin have a spear? He has Gugnir, which is a spear.
Gugnir.
Yes, he does.
Does he have a sword too?
I thought he had a sword. And while we're doing the podcast, I will look to make sure I'm right, because the other one honorable mention is, I think it has a name in the movie, but Conan the Barbarian
was almost on my list.
Has a crazy, ugly,
not good
fantasy type sword. But Conan the Barbarian in both comic books and the movie is a fun character. It's a fun movie. It's an old movie, but Conan the Barbarian is a cool character, and any sword he wields is awesome in my book. So while you guys talk amongst yourselves, I'm going to see what the name of, and if there exists a Sword of Odin.
Do it. That sword from Conan the Barbarian, like, just, it's not a good sword. Like, it's
any means.
It's such a short blade, but for some reason, a fat ass Ricasso has a 2-handed grip. Like, nothing about it's good.
Weird, crazy, ornamental shit.
However,
before the crossbar,
looks badass. Like, it looks cool as shit.
Totally.
And for those of you who that actually want a functional version of that, Albion makes one, but it's very, very expensive.
Yeah. And what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them fleeing before you, hear the lamentation of their women.
The lamentation of the women is the best.
Yeah, that's the best part.
Yeah,
That's my favorite part, definitely. So the last sword I want to talk about is Sting from Lord of the Rings. This is to go back to the idea of functional replicas. This is a sword I would pay good money for a functional carbon steel replica of. So I think I mentioned before that I have some complaints about the way Lord of the Rings was adapted from the books. My main complaint about the movies is that they take a lot of the theme of the Hobbit and of Lord of the Rings to a large extent is that small acts of heroism are what change the world, and that like the important stuff is what happens when small people are doing small things while the great people are over here doing some other shit, right? And so that is like one of the most beautiful themes of those books, and I feel like Peter Jackson just didn't get that, like in the way that Zack Snyder doesn't get the Trinity of DC.
Yeah, don't
Just
get me started on that.
Didn't get it. So he takes away a lot of the heroism that the Hobbits have and gives it to Aragorn. He does that in the Hobbit movie. He takes away a lot of the quiet heroism that Bilbo has and gives it to Thorin. So I think that's a main complaint I have. But if I were to pick something from the books that symbolizes that quiet heroism, I would say it's probably Sting. Okay, because it's right after Bilbo's first main adventure. Okay, he gets pretty much his butt handed to him by three trolls, ends up, hung up in a thorn bush, and his friends all get bagged in bags, and like only Gandalf saves them, right? But after that, he has a new perspective on things, and in their looting of the troll's cave, he finds Sting. Now, in that same moment, Gandalf and Thorin find two other swords from the same period from the Goblin Wars that were made in Gondolin. So that's Orcrist and Glamdring, which everyone knows about. But while they're admiring them and like, oh, these are so nice, we're going to keep them, Bilbo finds this little tiny, like it was obviously a dagger for a full-size person, but because he's a hobbit, it works as a short sword for him. And he's like, I'll just take this. And he like takes it and he wears it on the inside of his pants so you can't even see it, which means that it gets missed later when he gets captured by goblins and all this stuff. And literally, the coolest thing about it is that it glows when goblins are around. So like it enables him to survive throughout this whole thing. Like it helps him out. It helps him out in his riddle contest with Gollum. Without it, he wouldn't have made that. Gollum would have just eaten him. And then more importantly, in Lord of the Rings, when it gets passed on to Frodo and later to Sam kills, or at least mortally wounds, probably, or seriously wounds anyway, Shelob, who is a spider that's been around literally since like this, probably the Second Age, and who has eaten like elf lords and eaten everybody. And just the small act of quiet heroism of
nom.
Yeah, exactly. of Sam defending his master with this sword is what enables them later to destroy the ring. So to me, that is like the most like perfect representation of the quiet heroism that I love the Lord of the Rings for is Sting. Plus it glows blue when orcs are near, and that's awesome.
It's like that's super fun, but also it circles back to the whole hero sword. Like he's the hero of the story and he didn't know it.
Yeah,
he got the hero sword and didn't know it.
Like Sam is the hero of the Lord of the Rings, and he literally gets the sword by accident pretty much, and it enables him to save the day, basically. Yeah.
So Odin's sword has been a term that's been given to many weapons that were wielded by Odin. Mm-hmm. One of which was the Oversword of Asgard.
Okay.
I'm going to read this verbatim so you know what I'm talking about. One version, also known as the Oversword of Asgard, is a special weapon, a giant-sized sword that if ever unsheathed, it was said that the end of the universe is at hand just by the unsheathing of this sword. One story in the origin of this weapon said that it was created from a cursed Nibelung ring of gold, which would bring about the end of Asgard. Greed for the powerful ring had cost many lives, including that of the mortal incarnation of Thor, due to Odin's greed for it. There you go.
Okay.
The more you know. Now you know.
That's a powerful sword right there.
Nice.
That's what I'm talking about.
Circle back to John real quick. In terms of like, obviously it wouldn't be a 1-for-1 replica of Sting, but if you wanted like a leaf blade with cruciform hilt, you got some options. I mean, there's Atrims and there's the Valiant Armories. Both make some really good looking leaf blades.
True, but they should only be about this long though.
Yeah, they're like 25-inch blades, something around there. They're pretty long.
Yeah, no, they're. It should be a dagger to human-sized people and a short sword to hobbit-sized people.
So you want something like what, 10, 12 inches blade length, something like that.
14 inches probably.
14,
yeah, 16 inches.
So you want something way shorter.
Yeah. Well, I want it to be whatever.
Okay. No, that's okay. That makes total sense.
I don't just want a leaf blade. I can get a leaf blade sword.
Okay.
I want Sting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, like if you make it glue and goblins are around, glow blue and goblins are around, that'd be cool too.
If you could figure that out, John would appreciate it.
I would definitely, because I live around a lot of goblins, so I'd like to know.
What we're getting at is swords are fun. That's what we're getting
literally
at.
We're
fun.
Yeah.
They're all about the fun. Mm-hmm. However,
comma, pause for effect.
Swords are built for killing people, right? Isn't that what swords are built for? Is there any
Yes.
other use for swords than killing people?
They are not a
Water
tool.
bottles.
They are a weapon. I mean,
Yes. I mean, we use them to shred innocent plastic water bottles. I mean, what does that say about us? Because water bottles have never been a threat to mankind in any way.
First of all, I don't know about you.
Tell me about the uprising of the water bottles.
I'm not saying that the water bottles are threatening me outright, but sometimes they look at me kind of squirrely. And
side eye, they give you the side eye?
Give me the side eye.
All right.
So I give them the side sword.
We'll agree to disagree.
So, and another thing that's really cool too about swords, because you're right, swords are meant for killing people, but like they do capture like we talked about this at the beginning, like they capture the imagination. And I think it's because they're sidearms. Just like in America, handguns have captured the public imagination in a way that's beyond anything that they're actually useful for, right? Like
it's the lore.
Yeah, it's
the lore around it. Yeah.
Well, it's the lore, and it makes sense that you would form a personal connection with the thing that you carry every day,
right?
Like every day, like it's not a spear that you're gonna maybe pick up when you're gonna go to battle.
You give it a name.
You wake up in the morning and you're gonna go walk around. You put your sword on. Yeah. So yeah, you form a connection with it.
Agreed, and especially because like I guess like what people who aren't into this hobby don't know is that like swords are not primary weapons, like you said, they're sidearms,
exactly,
right? And like Battlefield, it was spears. If you were like a knight, it was the poleaxe, stuff like that. So the sword was like the backup weapon, and to me, I think what that registers as is like the thing between me and death. Like the only
everything else
it's
is
me
gone.
and this and this. It's you and it's the opponent, and that's all it is.
Sure.
And there's something about that. It's you and it's me and it's this sword, and there's something about that just resonates for me.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
It was life and death, and your ability and your skill to wield it and use it as a tool. And unlike now where you can like you can buy one from somebody who makes them and stuff like that. In the olden times, it was like this amazing thing that was made by these amazing craftsmen. And it was a thing that was like we said in some of these other things, that just wealthy people, or if you obtained one, you kept it for generations. That's kind of cool to me.
One, I think like a modern kind of like nowhere near the same because it's not life or death, but like all of us here have done one form of martial arts or another, whether that be jiu-jitsu or boxing or even just like amateur wrestling. And there's something about stepping out onto the mat or to the ring or whatever, and it's like it's just you and the other guy. Like the team's all around you, the team's there for support, and that's great, but it's me and him, and it's who better. So there's something about that, like it's me and it's the person I'm fighting. We both got swords, and it's just who's better. Like,
exactly.
And there's something that's just really, it's just endearing about that. So
and it's like imagining yourself in one of those battlefields where it's just a melee and it's people all around you, and it's like, how do you keep from getting stabbed?
Right? Because being, as a person who's cut himself with swords several times, just in little ways, it's not any fun. So like, if you cut me in a big
people
way,
aren't even trying to stab you.
Yeah, exactly. I know, for real. So
yeah, that will be a fun story later. Maybe we'll do a stupid shit with swords podcast where we talk about all the dumb things we've done with them.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see what the people that are watching think about why it is that swords have captured the imagination the way they have, because obviously they're disproportionately represented in every kind of cultural thing that there is. Books, movies, all that. The sword is the main thing, when really the sword's never been the main thing except in ancient Rome. So I mean, but
even then it wasn't it was that and the scutum. It was not biased. So like that's always negated, you know what I mean?
It's a weapon system.
Yeah, it was a weapon system. Exactly. It was like you would never just go sword fight with two gladi, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So but you're right, like it's weird how that became the thing, right?
I do think that the only sort of parallel I can think of is like the Old West and the romanization of the 6-shooter, and all that sort of stuff, or John Wick, right, with the way he uses handguns. Yeah, so like I think there is a romantic quality to sidearms, and I think
exactly the romantic quality of just you and muscle power and a piece of steel and your skill. That's it. There's no fancy optics or science or anything involved in this other than the science of pounding out steel in a forge and creating a tool and your skill and ability and muscles to make this thing work.
It's you versus me and who's better.
Kind of an amazing thing.
It's cool. It's a cool concept.
It is cool.
So yeah, like John said, sound off in the comments. Let us why swords? Like what it was personally for you, why swords? Why did you get into the hobby? Why are you watching this ridiculous podcast? Also, thank you so much. But why? Tell us why swords in the comments.
I mean, particularly, like, none of us know how to use a sword really very well at all.
Yeah.
But, like, so we have some swords. Obviously, you've seen our channel. I also have a spear. And let me tell you what. That spear, I feel like give me 10 minutes to practice with that 3 times in a couple of weeks, and like I'm going to be able to do pretty well with it. Like it's long. I can keep people away from me. It's evident how it wants to move. Like that is a very much more utilitarian weapon for most of history. And yet we don't see a lot of cool spears in movies. We see swords.
I mean, I think they all serve their purpose because once somebody closes their distance, your spear is useless. So I think everything in that type of the strategy of those type of weirds of worlds and battlefields, every single tool served its purpose.
1,000%.
From the spears to the people on horseback to the infantry with the swords, everything. And it's really something amazing in that type of history to think about and try to put yourself in it.
1,000% agree, but like, why aren't the other weapons romanticized?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like most armored fights between knights in the late Middle Ages were between 2 dudes with roundel daggers, like trying to knife each other in the eyes and the armpits.
Start out with pole axes.
Just go to swords.
Yeah.
It's like, why aren't those romanticized? Like, you kind of have to be like a hardcore collector to even know what some of these things are. Right. But everyone knows what a sword is.
I think it's the lore.
That's why.
The lore around a sword.
But why? But then
why
like,
is there lore around swords?
Why are swords romantic that way?
Yeah.
Why do they speak to you that way?
Yeah, I think it's a sidearm thing.
I think that I think that sometimes you're right. It's a sidearm thing. I think there's also a lot of artistry and craftsmanship and stuff that goes into a sword that doesn't maybe reflect the same in a spear or a dagger. And so I think that maybe it gives it's a larger canvas to express yourself. And like we said, I think that sometimes there's just a thing that you kind of put lore and you're right. It's a sidearm thing. I think there's a lot of things that go into it.
I think I figured it out. If you guys, I think I got it. I think I nailed it. Are you ready? Are you ready?
No, I can't wait.
Are you ready?
The anticipation is killing me.
It's going to be good. Swords are fucking cool.
Called it.
You did it.
Sometimes the simplest answer is the best one.
Right.
But all right, gentlemen, we're starting to run a little long. Do we have any closing thoughts? Anything we want to wrap up with real quick before we get going?
We did it. We did it, guys.
We did it.
We did it.
John?
Come on, fellas.
You know what? This has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to more for the future.
Awesome. So, yeah, we've been talking about doing the podcast internally for a long time. We've reached out to some other of your favorite sword YouTubers, fingers crossed, in terms of like getting guests on here. So this is going to be a regular recurring thing. Hopefully, if you guys take to it and enjoy this, this will be a normal thing that we post. And if you have any topics that you would like us to discuss in future podcasts, sound off in the comments. We'll probably be posting polls and stuff like that in the community section on the YouTube page where you can sound off on different topics and stuff like that to vote on. And
it could be questions you want us to answer. It can be topics you want us to discuss, like versus things, this versus that, whatever you want to see us talk about, we'd love to talk about.
Even if you want to know about like more personal stuff about us, like why we got into the hobby, stuff like that. It's like we're happy to talk about whatever you really want us to talk about. So yeah,
social security numbers, bank account numbers, I mean anything, whatever.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
We'll give it to you.
Yep. Come over, watch some football. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, if you want my social security number, you could be sad just like me. All right, thank you for joining us on this episode of Unsheathed Sword Reviews
Podcast.
Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Peace.